The terminal was unusually calm for a Monday morning, with sunlight spilling across the polished airport floors as passengers drifted toward gate C-18. Steven Seagal walked quietly among them, dressed simply in black jeans, a dark jacket and tinted reading glasses. No entourage. No cameras. Just a man catching a routine flight to Chicago for a charity appearance. He approached the gate, scanned his first-class boarding pass, and offered a polite nod to the agent. The staff recognized the name on the ticket but not the man in front of them. Steven preferred blending in. He stepped onto the aircraft, greeted the flight attendants and settled into seat 1A. He placed his bag overhead and sat back, calm and collected. A few minutes later, Captain Reeves entered the cabin during his pre-flight inspection. He was a tall, stern man with a rigid posture, someone who lived off authority. His eyes swept across the first-class seats and then stopped on Steven. The captain frowned. He stepped closer. "Sir," he said curtly, "this cabin is reserved for premium passengers only." Steven looked up, expression unmoved. "This is my seat," he replied calmly. "First-class ticket. Seat 1A. The captain didn't even glance at the ticket. "I'm asking you to move to economy while we sort this out." A flight attendant approached nervously. "Captain, I scanned his ticket at boarding. It's valid." Captain Reeves waved her off. "I'll handle this." Passengers in the first row glanced over. Some recognized Steven immediately but stayed quiet, sensing tension building. Steven remained seated, voice firm but respectful. "Check your system. You'll see I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." But the captain's tone hardened. "I don't need a lecture, sir. Please gather your belongings and step out of the seat. Now." The economy passengers boarding behind them slowed, watching the scene unfold. Someone whispered, "Isn't that Steven Seagal?" Another began recording on their phone. Steven's calm presence seemed to irritate the captain even more. The captain leaned in. "If you don't comply, I'll have you escorted off this flight." A hush fell across the cabin. Steven looked at him, steady, controlled, completely unshaken. "I'm not moving from a seat I paid for," he said. Captain Reeves' jaw tightened. "Then we have a problem." But the real problem was only just beginning. Because what Steven did next changed the entire flight, and the captain's career forever. The air inside the cabin felt heavier as Captain Reeves stood over Steven, radiating impatience. Passengers slowed their boarding, their curiosity sharpening into concern. A couple in row 3 exchanged uneasy glances. A businessman paused before placing his bag in the overhead bin, sensing that something was very wrong. Steven sat with his hands relaxed on his knees, posture calm and grounded. He had faced tense situations all over the world, but there was something deeply unsettling about being treated like a problem on a peaceful morning flight, especially by someone entrusted with authority. A flight attendant, Maria, stepped forward hesitantly. She looked from Steven to the captain. "Sir, his ticket scanned properly. He is on the manifest." The captain didn't even bother turning toward her. "I said I'll take care of this." His voice sliced through the tension. "You're not authorized to override seating misallocations." Maria swallowed, glancing apologetically at Steven. Steven lifted his boarding pass slightly. "Look again. Seat 1A. But confirmed." His voice was steady, controlled. But the captain didn't check. He didn't even look. Instead, he turned toward the passengers still filing in. "Ladies and gentlemen, please proceed quickly to your seats," he announced loudly, pretending the situation was standard procedure. "We have a minor issue up front." People didn't buy it. 2 passengers in row 2 continued recording, their cameras angled subtly. A mother holding her toddler paused beside seat 1C and whispered, "Why is he talking to him like that?" Her husband whispered back, "Power trip. You can see it." The captain leaned closer to Steven. "Sir, last warning. Move to economy until we fix this. Your cooperation is expected." Steven didn't blink. "Check the passenger list. That's all I'm asking." Captain Reeves let out a short, annoyed breath. "I don't have time for this. You're holding up the plane." Steven raised an eyebrow. "You created the problem. Not me." Passengers murmured. Maria looked visibly shaken now, torn between respecting the chain of command and wanting to treat Steven with basic dignity. Another attendant, older, more experienced, approached. "Captain," he whispered discreetly, "we should check the manifest. It'll take 10 seconds. Reeves snapped. "I said no. I know how to do my job." The attendant backed away, intimidated. Steven's voice remained soft but unyielding. "I'm not moving because you made an assumption. Check the system. Then you'll know the truth." But the captain's pride had already taken over. He straightened and reached for his cockpit phone. "If you refuse to comply, I'll have airport security remove you." Gasps rippled through the first-class cabin. A man seated directly behind Steven spoke up. "Security? For what?" "The man's just sitting in his assigned seat." Another passenger chimed in, "This is ridiculous. Just verify his ticket." The captain ignored all of them. He pressed the intercom button. "Requesting security assist." "Captain," Maria interrupted, voice trembling, "please, this is escalating more than necessary. He isn't being disruptive." Reeves' eyes flared with irritation. "You're overstepping." Maria stepped back, her face flushing with embarrassment and frustration. Steven gently adjusted his glasses. "I'm not causing a scene," he said evenly. "I'm just not giving up a seat I paid for." The mother with the toddler finally spoke up. "This is wrong. You're treating him like he's guilty of something." Her words emboldened others. A man in a suit stood halfway. "Captain, I recognize him. That's Steven Seagal. Why don't you just check the manifest before making threats?" The captain froze for a fraction of a second, but his pride refused to let him show it. Instead, he dismissed the comment with a scoff. "I don't care who he is." Steven exhaled slowly. He wasn't angry, just disappointed. He had dealt with disrespect before, but the captain's refusal to even look at the passenger list was more than ignorance. It was a deliberate misuse of authority. Passengers kept recording. The atmosphere felt charged, every second heavier than the last. Steven's calmness, instead of de-escalating, seemed to provoke the captain further. Reeves stepped closer, voice cold and sharp. "This is your final chance to comply. Now." Steven looked up, eyes steady and almost sorrowful. "The uniform you're wearing should stand for fairness. But you're not being fair." A murmur swept across the cabin. People knew they were watching something wrong, something bigger than a seating dispute. And the pressure inside the aircraft kept building. Because everyone sensed the captain was seconds away from making a catastrophic mistake. The cabin had gone from curious chatter to an almost electric silence. Every eye was fixed on Captain Reeves as he hovered near the cockpit phone, still threatening to call security. His jaw was locked, his temper simmering just beneath the surface. But what truly unsettled the passengers was how calm Steven Seagal remained, grounded, steady, dignified. The tension built with every passing second. Reeves finally lifted the phone again, his voice sharp. "I'm requesting immediate assistance at the aircraft door," passenger refusing to comply. Before he could finish the call, an elderly man in 1C leaned forward. "He's not refusing anything. He's just asking you to check the manifest. Is that too much for you?" Reeves glared at him. "Sir, stay out of this." But the elderly man didn't flinch. Not when someone's being treated unfairly. Steven gave the man a small nod of gratitude. The captain slammed the receiver back into its holder with far more force than necessary. "Enough," he spat. "I won't have passengers interfering with flight operations." Maria, the young flight attendant, stepped toward him again, visibly conflicted. "Captain, please. For the sake of everyone, just verify the system. The passenger list clearly." "Maria," Reeves snapped, "another word and I'll have you removed from this flight as well." The threat hit her like a blow. Her face turned pale. She backed away, blinking back emotion. Steven watched her quietly. "You don't have to treat her that way," he said softly. The captain spun around. "I'll treat you however I need to maintain order." "Confidence isn't the same as bullying," Steven replied. The passengers murmured again, louder this time. A young man in row 2 stood halfway up. "Why are you escalating? He's literally just sitting there." Another woman raised her phone higher, recording with a trembling hand. "You're going to get yourself in trouble," she warned the captain. "Everybody's watching." Reeves ignored her. He walked right up to Steven, standing close enough to invade his personal space. "Sir, you will move to economy. That's final." Steven didn't move. Not an inch. His calmness filled the space like a silent warning. "I'm not moving because you made a decision before checking the facts," he said. "You assumed something and now you're trying to enforce your assumption with authority." The captain's face reddened. "I don't need a lecture from you. And I don't need to be disrespected," Steven replied, voice deeper now, firm, resolute. "Not by anyone." The mother with the toddler stepped forward bravely. "My child is watching this. You're teaching him that power means treating people unfairly." A gasp spread through the cabin. The captain's fist tightened. He barked at her, "Sit down, ma'am." Her toddler whimpered at the sudden outburst. That was the moment the tension snapped. Steven slowly rose from his seat. His full height, his presence, his calm-controlled posture, it all made the cabin fall dead silent. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He didn't even look angry. But the strength in his stance said everything. "Captain," he said evenly, "don't yell at her. She's not the problem here." The pilot's hand hovered unconsciously near his belt, not a weapon but a telltale sign of a man trying to reassert authority he felt slipping away. The gesture made the front rows tense up even more. The young man in row 2 whispered, "This is getting dangerous." Reeves stepped back half an inch, thrown off by the shift in energy. Steven's calmness, no fear, no aggression, just complete control, only made the captain appear more reckless. "You're obstructing a flight operation," Reeves snapped. "This is grounds for removal." Steven held his gaze. "No. I'm standing up for myself. And everyone here sees what you're doing." Dozens of phones were recording now. The pilot glanced around and finally realized the depth of the situation. He wasn't just dealing with a passenger anymore, he was dealing with witnesses, with evidence, with people willing to speak out. A few passengers started calling out. "Check the list. He's right, this is discrimination. Stop abusing your position." The pressure on Reeves grew unbearable, yet he still refused to yield. Pride had wrapped itself around him like a vice. And then the final blow landed, not from Steven but from a trembling voice behind him. Maria whispered, barely audible, "Captain, please. You're making a mistake." Reeves shot her a furious look, but for the first time, doubt flickered across his face. The cabin held its breath. Everyone sensed it. The pilot had reached the edge. And the fall was coming. The cabin was thick with tension, but something subtle began to shift. Among the murmurs of outrage and the quiet hum of phones recording, a teen in row 3 leaned forward and whispered sharply to his friend. "Wait, that's Steven Seagal. The actor, the martial arts guy." The words traveled like wildfire. Passengers craned their necks, some squinting to confirm what their ears had already heard. Phones moved higher, cameras aimed, fingers hovered over record buttons. Some passengers mouthed the words silently to one another, confirming the recognition. Steven, noticing the stir, remained perfectly still. He didn't rise, didn't smile, and didn't acknowledge the whispers. He understood the power of remaining humble. Fame, he knew, wasn't what he wanted right now. He wanted justice, fairness, dignity, and most importantly, to stand his ground without turning the moment into a spectacle about himself. "Seriously?" whispered a woman near 1C, nudging her husband. "That's Steven Seagal? Why isn't anyone helping him?" Her husband's eyes widened. "I thought he was just another passenger." The recognition changed the energy in the cabin. Previously hesitant bystanders began speaking more confidently. "Check the list," someone called. "He's in first class. Just look." Even some economy passengers who had been watching from the aisles joined in. "Don't let him push you around," shouted a man near the rear. Captain Reeves noticed the whispers but pretended not to hear them. He straightened his shoulders and squared his jaw, trying to assert dominance. "This is not about who he is," he barked. "It's about following protocol." But the truth was, he had no idea what he was doing anymore. Each passenger in first class now looked him in the eye, quietly judging, recording, and silently demanding accountability. The whispers of recognition had transformed the situation from a one-on-one dispute into a full-scale moral standoff. Steven sat calmly, his hands folded on his lap, and let the passengers speak. He didn't need to raise his voice. Every flicker of phone screens capturing the scene, every whispered confirmation of his identity, reinforced his position. The pilot's authority, once absolute, was visibly slipping under the pressure of collective awareness. "Wait, that's really him," a young woman said aloud, motioning to her phone. "I've seen all his movies. This is insane. He's doing nothing wrong." Another passenger leaned over from the next row. "Captain, seriously, check the system. His ticket is valid." Reeves froze for the briefest moment, feeling the weight of judgment pressing down on him. Yet, stubborn pride still tethered him to his misguided authority. He could not yet admit to the mistake. Meanwhile, Steven's quiet composure seemed to inspire confidence in others. A father in row 2 lifted his voice, addressing both the captain and surrounding passengers. "He's paid for this seat. You're profiling him, Captain. That's not right." At that moment, a hush spread across the cabin again. The whispers of recognition had become a chorus of support. Passengers were no longer passive observers. They were witnesses. The collective realization was powerful. This was a man being treated unfairly simply because of appearance, and everyone in the cabin could see it. Despite the recognition, Steven did not exploit it. He didn't announce his identity or demand special treatment. Instead, he let the integrity of his presence speak louder than fame ever could. The whispers continued, passengers became more vocal, and the captain's position grew ever more precarious. Steven's calm humility contrasted sharply with the captain's escalating tension. Every recorded video, every subtle comment, every murmured declaration of support chipped away at the authority that had seemed unshakable moments ago. And in that moment, it was clear to everyone present. This was no longer just a seating dispute. This had become a test of fairness, dignity, and the courage to stand up against unwarranted authority. Steven's silent strength had shifted the energy in the cabin. What had begun as a confrontation between a passenger and a pilot had become a collective reckoning, and the whispers of recognition had lit the spark. The stage was set for the moment everyone was waiting for. Steven Seagal was about to take his stand, not with fame or aggression, but with integrity, calm resolve, and unshakable dignity. Have you ever witnessed someone quietly standing up against unfair authority? Share your experience in the comments below. The cabin had transformed. What started as a simple confrontation had escalated into a tense standoff. Passengers were no longer quietly observing. They were witnesses, their phones raised, their eyes locked on the scene unfolding in the first-class section. Captain Reeves' authority, once absolute, now trembled under the weight of collective scrutiny. Steven Seagal remained seated, calm, almost meditative as he watched the pilot fidget and shift uneasily. He hadn't raised his voice yet. He hadn't demanded special treatment. He simply waited for the right moment, because this wasn't about him. It was about fairness. It was about dignity. The mother with the toddler whispered to the passenger beside her, "He's not even reacting. Look at how calm he is." The passenger nodded. "Yeah, and the captain's losing it." Reeves, feeling cornered, took a step closer. His tone sharpened. "I don't care who you are. Move to economy immediately or I will have you removed. That's final." Steven slowly rose from his seat, the movement deliberate, commanding attention. The cabin went silent. Even those still boarding paused mid-step, sensing the shift in energy. Every phone was raised, recording, capturing a moment that would soon be replayed countless times. He stood tall, calm but imposing, his presence filling the space. He didn't shout. He didn't glare. He simply looked at the captain, a steady, unwavering gaze that seemed to strip away the pilot's pretensions of authority. "Captain," Steven said, voice firm but measured, carrying clearly across the cabin, "I am not here to argue with you. I'm not here to prove my fame. I am here because respect is not optional. It is earned and it is owed, to everyone." A ripple ran through the cabin. Passengers leaned in, listening intently. Phones captured every word. He continued, voice rising slightly, not with anger but with authority grounded in truth. "You assumed something about me because of how I look. You assumed I would comply because you hold a uniform. That is not fairness. That is not justice. And that is not how we treat people who pay for a seat they have earned." The pilot's jaw tightened. His fingers twitched near his belt as if struggling to maintain control. But the quiet, undeniable moral weight of Steven's words left him exposed. "Respect is not given to those who demand it through intimidation," Steven added, voice calm but resolute. "Respect is demonstrated through fairness, understanding, and integrity. I have done nothing wrong, Captain. And I will not be humiliated in front of these witnesses for your assumptions." A few passengers clapped softly, emboldened. A woman in row 2 spoke up. "Check the manifest. He's right." The murmurs turned into stronger voices, and the whispers of recognition became affirmations. Passengers began expressing support openly. "You're being unfair. Verify his ticket. This isn't right." The pilot's face flushed. The tension, once entirely under his control, now felt like it was collapsing around him. Each word Steven spoke, each calm gesture, each unwavering second of his stance, stripped away the pretense of absolute authority. Maria, the young flight attendant, stood trembling, a mixture of relief and awe on her face. She whispered to a colleague, "I can't believe he's handling it like that. So calm, so dignified." Steven looked over at her and nodded briefly, a small gesture of acknowledgement. His calm courage had shifted the energy entirely. The passenger's confidence bolstered his stand, and the captain's composure began to crumble. Finally, Steven lowered his voice, making the final point resonate across the cabin. "Authority is not a license to demean or threaten. It is a responsibility. And responsibility means ensuring fairness, even when it's inconvenient." The cabin held its breath. The pilot's glare faltered. He could feel the eyes of everyone upon him, judging him silently but heavily. Steven sat back down with deliberate calm, almost meditative. His presence had spoken louder than any argument. The first-class cabin had become a place where dignity and fairness had been asserted, not through confrontation but through unwavering composure, integrity, and truth. Passengers whispered among themselves, now emboldened. Some recorded, some spoke out, all witnesses to a man standing for justice quietly, but with undeniable power. In that moment it was clear, the scales had tipped. The pilot, once fully in control, now faced the weight of scrutiny. The moral high ground belonged entirely to Steven Seagal. If you were sitting there, would you have spoken up for him or stayed silent? Share your choice in the comments below. The standoff in first class had reached a tipping point. Passengers' murmurs had grown louder, whispers of recognition turning into open comments and recorded videos. Phones were raised everywhere, capturing every tense interaction. Captain Reeves stood frozen for a moment, unsure whether to double down or finally relent. But before he could make a move, the cockpit door opened and a second officer, First Officer Jenkins, entered the cabin. Immediately he sensed the tension. "What's going on here?" Jenkins asked, scanning the room. His eyes landed on Steven Seagal, seated calmly, hands folded in his lap, exuding a quiet authority that made the rest of the cabin lean in. One passenger couldn't contain himself. "He's in first class. You need to check the manifest." Jenkins moved closer to the cockpit phone and pulled out his tablet. Within seconds he confirmed what everyone else had already suspected. Steven Seagal's ticket was valid. Seat 1A, first class, fully paid and confirmed. The pilot froze. His jaw tightened as he realized the mistake, but his pride still made him stubborn. It's a clerical error," he muttered, fumbling for an excuse. Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "Sir, it's not a clerical error. You refused to check the manifest before confronting a paying passenger. That's a serious breach of procedure." The cabin collectively held its breath. Steven remained seated, silent but poised. He didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He let the evidence speak for itself. The passengers' reactions shifted dramatically. Murmurs of support grew louder. One man from row 2 exclaimed, "Finally! Someone with sense." Others recorded, some even shouted, "Check the system. He's right." Captain Reeves' face reddened, realizing he had lost not only the argument but also the moral and procedural high ground. He tried to explain, but every word sounded weak under the scrutiny of passengers and colleagues alike. Steven spoke finally, his voice calm, measured, and authoritative. "Respect should not be conditional on appearance, name, or fame. What happened here could have happened to anyone. That's the harm I want recognized. And that's why fairness matters." A wave of murmured agreement washed over the cabin. Flight attendants exchanged relieved glances, grateful that the confrontation was finally moving toward resolution. Even the passengers who had never seen Steven Seagal before recognized the dignity in his response. Jenkins nodded toward Steven. "Sir, I apologize on behalf of the airline. You have every right to remain in your seat. This has been handled poorly, and I assure you it will be addressed." The captain's pride crumbled further. His hands trembled slightly as he turned to the cabin, trying to maintain authority that had already evaporated. I'm sorry for the confusion," he muttered weakly. Passengers whispered to one another, some shaking their heads in disbelief at how quickly the balance of power had shifted. "Wow, he handled that so calmly," one passenger said. "And the pilot, he just melted under pressure." Steven gave a small nod of acknowledgement to Jenkins and the cabin. "Authority comes with responsibility," he said softly. "It's not just a uniform or a title. It's about treating people fairly and humanely." The crew, finally relieved, began moving back to their duties. Maria, the young flight attendant, whispered to a colleague, "I've never seen anyone handle that situation with such calm," and the passengers, they all respected him for it. The captain slumped slightly into his seat, muttering excuses that nobody believed. He was exposed, not just to Steven Seagal, not just to the crew but to every witness aboard the plane. His misuse of authority had been made painfully visible, and it was clear that there would be serious consequences once the airline reviewed the footage. Steven sat back, composed, his presence never faltering. The passengers' admiration was tangible. Children who had been nervous now smiled at the way their parents whispered about the calm courage of the man in 1A. In those moments, it became clear to everyone. This was a lesson in integrity, respect, and responsibility. Steven hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't demanded special treatment. He had stood firm on principle, and that quiet courage had shifted the entire power dynamic. Should the pilot lose his job after this incident? Tell us what you think in the comments below. The stage was now set for the aftermath. Steven Seagal's calm dignity had not only reclaimed his rightful seat, it had exposed a misuse of authority in front of dozens of witnesses. The incident was no longer just a confrontation. It was about accountability, fairness, and the viral proof that even those in power must answer for their actions. The plane hummed with quiet energy as passengers continued to record, talk, and share the story in real time. Steven's stand had changed everything, and it was only a matter of time before the story spread far beyond the aircraft cabin. By the time the plane touched down in Chicago, the story of what had happened in first class had already begun to spread. Passengers shared clips of the confrontation on social media, some in real time, others uploading videos from their phones once they landed. Within hours, the footage went viral. Headlines appeared everywhere. Pilot refuses first-class seat to Steven Seagal, passenger's calm response goes viral. Airline pilot publicly shamed by actor in first-class standoff. The videos captured everything: the captain's initial aggression, Steven's calm composure, and the passengers' growing support. Social media was flooded with comments praising Seagal for his restraint and leadership. Viewers from around the world commented on the injustice and the courage he showed under pressure. Meanwhile, the airline was receiving calls, emails, and tweets from passengers, employees, and the public demanding accountability. The internal investigation began almost immediately. Airline executives reviewed the flight recordings, interviewed crew members, and cross-checked the ticketing system. Every detail confirmed what the viral footage had already shown. The captain had refused to verify Steven Seagal's first-class ticket, acted on assumptions, and escalated the situation unnecessarily. By the next morning, the airline released a statement. "We sincerely apologize to Mr. Seagal for the incident on Flight 412. Our policies regarding fair treatment of all passengers must always be upheld. After review, we have terminated the employment of the pilot involved due to violations of protocol and failure to maintain professional standards." The news spread quickly across mainstream media and social networks. Headlines praised Steven's composure and called his handling of the incident a masterclass in dignity under pressure. Even late-night news segments replayed clips of the confrontation, highlighting how one man's calm courage had exposed the misuse of authority. Steven Seagal himself shared a statement with reporters. "No one should be judged by appearance. This isn't about fame or identity. It's about fairness, dignity, and treating every person with respect. If we expect authority to be respected, it must also respect others." Fans and social media users echoed his message. Hashtags like #respect, #fairness, and #SeagalStandsUp began trending. Many viewers commented on how they had witnessed similar abuses of power in their own lives and found inspiration in Steven's example. Meanwhile, the former pilot faced intense scrutiny. Colleagues and friends publicly criticized his behavior, while airline employees expressed relief that accountability had been enforced. Internal reports suggested that his conduct could have led to further disciplinary actions if left unchecked. The passengers on the flight continued sharing their own experiences, noting how the calm intervention of one individual had shifted the dynamics of power entirely. Many expressed pride at having witnessed the event firsthand. Some even uploaded slow-motion analyses of Steven's demeanor, pointing out how his controlled posture and voice had diffused potential violence and commanded respect without aggression. The incident also sparked broader conversations online about authority, privilege, and the importance of fairness. Journalists and bloggers debated how such behavior could be prevented in the future, emphasizing that this was more than a celebrity story, it was a lesson in ethics and human dignity. In the end, Steven Seagal's handling of the situation became a blueprint for how calm, principled action can overcome intimidation and misuse of power. He didn't need to shout, escalate, or force compliance. He simply demonstrated integrity, patience, and clarity. If you believe in respect and equality, type respect in the comments. By the time the evening news aired, the story had traveled across continents. Steven Seagal had not only reclaimed his rightful seat, he had turned a simple airline incident into a viral message about fairness, responsibility, and human dignity, a lesson that resonated far beyond the walls of the airplane cabin. And in countless homes around the world, people watched the video and whispered to themselves, "That's how you stand up without losing your calm. That's how respect is earned."